I think it's no secret that the Spanish Grand Prix at Catalonia is met with apprehension each year, as races there don't tend to produce exciting races very reliably, shall we say. Let's have a little look at some of the things that contribute to the Barcelona track's slight dearth of excitement. Firstly, Barcelona is the main testing track for all Formula One teams. Nowadays, with such restricted testing, all of the proper on-track pre-season preparation takes place over 8 full days at Barcelona. This ends up with each team probably doing 800 to 1000 laps of the circuit each before the season even properly begins. While the temperature is a lot lower in winter testing than they'll find once they get to the actual Spanish Grand Prix event, one thing is clear. The teams gather a huge amount of data on the track and will have more knowledge about how to approach this race than any other. There have been race weekends in the past where Friday practice has been disrupted due to bad weather and the teams have been unable to gather information about the track like they normally would through free practice. Situations like this have forced them to fudge their race preparation program somewhat and try and do the best they can in that short practice session on the Saturday morning before the car setups are locked down for qualifying. As a consequence, qualifying and the race following a disrupted Friday have tended to be a little bit more chaotic, a little more seat of the pants, and somewhat less predictable, to the extent that there have been long murmurings of significantly chopping down free practice to limit the team's knowledge going into competitive sessions. With winter testing at Barcelona though, well, that's quite the opposite. The teams go in with so much data that, barring disruptive weather events like rain, wind, or super hot weather, almost nobody will be particularly surprised about their own running through the weekend. Part of the reason we tend to get a more Noah's Ark style grid and performance level among the teams is that teams aren't able to mix it up through canniness or cunning. Everyone is bringing their A game to Spain. So then the debate becomes, should we be testing at tracks that we go racing at? Particularly, should we do so much testing at tracks like Barcelona? I'd argue no, but then we have scenarios like Abu Dhabi where they all test immediately after the race because it's super cheap as everyone is already there. So there's a trade-off there in that thinking. Okay, so that's problem one. Too much data from too much testing. Moving winter testing to some non-championship track like Jerez might help with this a little. So now let's look at the nature of the track itself, which is an interesting one as it's not like Monaco and Hungary where everything is too slow and narrow to overtake with ease, and it's not particularly dirty or without a decent straight. No, it comes down to the character of the track. Part of the reason it's so good for testing is it has a nice mixture of high-speed corners, mid-speed corners and low-speed corners, and it does have those straights with significant braking points at the end. So it's got a little bit of everything really when looking to explore the balance, traction, speed, stability and tyre behaviour of your car. But the number and position of the mid to high speed corners are really what cause a lot of the problems, because with such a huge pit straight you'd think it would be a little easier to get fighting with the car ahead. So let's go back to an old classic bugbear, driving in the dirty air of the car ahead. As we know, the aerodynamic parts of the Formula One cars throw all the air away from the bodywork with huge amounts of energy. The chassis manipulates the air and sends it spinning and soaring in all directions, and for more details on this you can watch videos on aerodynamics and vortices. Obviously, if you're on a straight, this is great for the car behind because the leading car has got rid of all the air for you. You don't have to waste as much energy pushing through it yourself. And at F1 speeds, air can feel thick like water. It drags you back a lot. Now the thing about mid and high speed corners, particularly these long ones like at Barcelona, they're aero limited. And this essentially means your ability to generate downforce is what limits your speed through the corner. If you've got a good chassis, good setup and a nice clean air in front of you, you can pelt it through the corner pretty fast. If your wings are inefficient or you happen to be in the wake of a car ahead, your ability to create downforce is reduced because that leading car has pushed all the air away. Air you need to work the wings and bodywork into generating downforce. It was said a couple of times this weekend that the wake of the car, the significant disruption to the air behind, could be as long as 5 seconds, as in a car 5 seconds behind the car in front will start to feel the reduced aero effects of sitting in its wake. Now it's more likely this is closer to 3 to 4 seconds, but that's still pretty significant. When a car is as close as 1 second to the car ahead in Spain, they lose about 6% downforce. This rises to about 12% if they're lucky enough to get within half a second. So you can see why gaps between cars start to spread out. When following in the disturbed wake of another car, your own downforce takes a hit, particularly at the front wing, the first part of your car to work the air. Reduced front-end downforce results in understeer, where the front of the car can't bite, can't grip as effectively as it should. This means the front starts to drift wide as the car turns in and the driver needs to slow down or risk sailing off outside the corner. So the result is the following car has to take these corners slower than the car ahead, losing time and falling behind. Now the big meaty main straight at Barcelona unfortunately has this aero-limited high-speed corner leading onto it, so it's very hard to follow the car ahead closely enough to be able to chase them down the pit straight. You're on the back foot before you can even think about attacking. It's similar down the other DRS zone on the back straight. You have to plough through this fast chicane and this fairly flat out right-hander Campsa before you get to it, so it's hard to keep up with your rival at the point when you need to overtake. Now they have tried to fix some of Barcelona's track problems. La Caixa and Europcar were changed because those parts of the track were getting a little bit too fast for the available runoff, and at La Caixa in particular, they transformed it into something a little more overtakey. See, until these two changes, Barcelona didn't really have a point where the cars hit a hardcore braking point that turned into a tight corner and a traction zone. If you have a heavy braking zone, you can try and get alongside the car ahead by being defter on the brakes. You can then try and position yourself for the launch out of the corner and outgun them up the track. But Barcelona has a lot of sweeping corners. While turn 1, for example, is preceded by a somewhat heavy braking, it's still a fast turn and you don't get the full stop-start in momentum that opens up overtaking opportunities. So there end up being very few lines through turns 1 and 2 as cars need to cling on through the speedy corners, and they end up drifting into each other quite frequently if they end up vaguely side by side. See the two Hasses or Norris and Stroll during the race. So with lots of testing data under their belts and a lot of mid to high speed corners, it's easy to see how these races can become a little processional. With Barcelona looking on shaky ground for renewal, perhaps the problem will solve itself. But even if the F1 circus travels elsewhere, we must be careful to learn from the tough races at Barcelona and think about doing things differently. Max Verstappen has already raised concerns that the Zandvoort circuit looking to replace Barcelona is not really suitable for close racing in F1, at least not in its current form.